Hi, everybody. I'm Alistair Wright. Today, I am joined by Coach Henry. Thank you so much for joining us today, Coach Henry.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. So first question of the day, how did you first begin playing tennis?
Well, it's funny. I started playing when I was 15 years old. Um, Actually, we lived in Connecticut, Ledyard, Connecticut, Gales Ferry, Connecticut. And I had watched my father play. So he was playing with some friends and I just picked it up. Before then, I played football, baseball, a little basketball. And he took me out and that kind of sparked the fire in me.
Mm-hmm. What made you drawn to tennis over other sports?
I don't know. I played team sports before, since I was 6 years old, organized sports from 6 until 14. And then I really wasn't that big. So
Yeah,
by 14, 15, I kind of had a late growth spurt after that. So I just, started hanging out and playing tennis at the community center in Gales Ferry. And I started practicing every day. And from then on, I gave up, all the other sports and just focused on tennis. So it was a challenge more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any role models in the tennis world that influenced your love for the sport?
Well, way back when I was growing up, Arthur Ashe, in his heyday, we're talking about late 70s, mid 70s, late 70s. And, that kind of sparked me. And then, we moved to Wilmington, North Carolina. And in Wilmington, actually, there was a doctor there, Dr. Hubert Eaton, who had a tennis court in his backyard. And that's who Athea Gibson lived with when she left New York to train as a professional athlete. So Dr. Eaton was he and my dad were fraternity brothers. And I read the book, autobiography of Athea Gibson. And it was funny. My dad had moved down to North Carolina a year before us. We were still in Connecticut. And I asked him if he had met Dr. Eaton, because I had just read about Dr. Eaton and Athea's autobiography. And he said, "Oh, he's a fraternity brother. He was just over to our house last week." So I couldn't wait to move from North Carolina, from Connecticut to North Carolina. And then he actually gave me my first real lessons over at his house. So that's kind of how I just felt like, I belonged there. It was, that was when I actually learned about the ATA during that time. So,
when you were working with the Williams sisters, was there one particular moment where you realized that they were special?
It was kind of funny. I met them, and their father invited me, over to hit with Venus and Serena. They were 12 and 13 then. And we played a set with each of them, and I won the set. And then the father asked me, if I wanted a job working with he and his daughter. So that kind of, got me into it. Then I did like half-day sessions with them, and then just going out, seeing the way they were practicing. I knew they were different at that age. They hadn't refined their games or anything then, but they were practicing 4 to 8 hours a day when we started working. So that's a lot different. I know, I don't know if you can imagine practicing that many hours, and with the adult players, and they just got stronger and stronger, and the rest is history.
Yeah, those are I've had summers where I've been out there for 8 hours in the heat. That is an intense. Did you notice any differences between how men and women were treated on the pro tour while working with the Williams family? Do you feel that this has changed since then, or no?
Well, early on, they were anomalies, that everybody kind of treated them strange anyway, looked at them kind of differently. But I got the feeling when they were coming out, people wanted them to not succeed so that they could, point their fingers and say, "We knew you couldn't do it." But they defied all of that. And it was like the sea parted for them. Things opened up and because of their hard work. And that, you know, it was interesting actually seeing them change a lot of things in the game. So
Mhm. Do you think that race is treated differently on the national versus international tennis circuit?
I think, you know, I knowing the history of, you know, this country, I think initially, well, really the way, you know, the USTA started out, they didn't allow Black members, you know, and that really kind of started, you know, the ATA getting started and coming together, because that was where a lot of the, you know, Black business people and professional people could play and be in an organization. And, you know, they were outside of the USTA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, race has always been there, I think, in this country. You know, it's a little different now. But the last 20, 30 years, I mean, no matter what, it's there, you know, whether it stops a person or, you know, inhibits them from developing. I think, you know, that's a interesting, you know, question, but it can, but if you don't allow it, I think, you know, you just got to work through it. So.
Yeah. Do you feel that like the USTA and the ATP and other organizations are actively trying to ensure that race doesn't kind of continue to be a barrier, or is that kind of been pushed off to the side?
You know, I think it just depends. It depends on what's happening in the world. You know, if it's drawn to, you know, something happened racially or whatever, and then, you know, people are in an uproar, yeah, it'll be, you know, we're more sensitive to that. The world is more sensitive. But if it's just regular business, I don't, you know, I don't think, because I know a lot of Black players, they try not to, you know, throughout my being around them over the years, they try not to allow race to to interfere with
Yeah.
them having opportunities, you know. But, you know, if somebody's, you know, Black or white or whatever, it shouldn't make a difference. But I think on some levels it does.
Then earlier you brought up the ATA. So how do you feel the ATA has impacted Black communities in America? Has their work changed over time or stayed relatively constant through the decades?
I think the ATA, you know, it served a purpose, you know, early on, and then, you know, 70s, 80s, 90s, it wasn't really, you know, I think the organization suffered. I've been actively involved with it. I'm a lifetime member.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I'm supportive of it. I'm not real active in it too much. Hopefully I will be in the future. But I just think, you know, in the early days, it was where, you know, a lot of Blacks, you know, especially Black professional people, Black doctors, Black lawyers, Black, you know, college educated. Tennis wasn't really a sport for everyone.
Yeah.
And, you know, even in the white society, tennis and golf weren't. But, you know, just like for the Black, for the Black society, Black social society, that was, you know, upper crust played it and learned it. And, you know, so it's been, I think tennis is one of those sports that, you know, it's more than color barrier, it's a class thing also.
Yeah.
So a lot of Blacks that who were affluent or whatever and grew up playing tennis, that was their organization. And it was more of a social thing more than, I know really up until, you know, the Athea Gibson and Arthur Ashe days, it was more where Black elite organized and played the sport.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, now, you know, from Athea wasn't from wealthy, you know, the affluent, you know, the doctors came together and said, hey, we're gonna, you know, get behind Athea and crush the color barrier that the USTA had. So that served a purpose. And a lot of people moved forward as that moved forward. So I think it was something we all benefited from.
Yeah. So you are working on your master's thesis, correct?
Yes, actually.
Can you kind of tell the audience what your thesis is?
You know, it's kind of funny. You know, when I got the email and you were telling me about yourself and, you know, you were doing a report, I answered right away.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm actually when I became coach of Bethune-Cookman, when I moved down here, I decided I would go after a master's in organizational leadership. So in doing that, I decided I would do it on increasing Black tennis participation at HBCUs. So I have one more class in that, and actually have to defend my thesis in the fall, and I'll be done with it. I've done the bulk of it, but it was very interesting because it was allowed me to kind of get out some of the emotions and feelings I had that I spent my whole lifetime, with tennis. So now it was like, oh, okay, I get it. It makes sense. So I could express it and research it, and it made a lot of sense for me. So
What have you discovered while researching your master's thesis that you wished more people knew about?
I just think really knowing the impact that HBCUs had in making or starting the ATA, because a lot of people, I don't know if they know, the ATA national tournament was a tournament that was initially played at HBCU college campuses. When I came to Bethune, the guy that was head of our sports information department, I kind of got him started, in researching. He gave me some old pictures of when they played the national tournament here in Daytona. And Bethune, we don't even have tennis courts anymore. We used to have tennis courts. We actually used the city courts. So they had 6 clay courts, right on campus. So that was news to me. I was like, wow, and it was funny. One day I was at work, and we actually our library sends out old mailings, old letters that Mary McLeod, Miss Dr. Bethune used to send out, and she would correspond with people all over the world. And this one, and it was during the ATA last year, one came across my email, and she was talking about the ATA National being played in Daytona Beach, and how it brought in people from all over the world, especially Caribbean and, prominent Black people here. So, I mean, that just, it make chills up and down, my arms thinking about it. So, I mean, there is a history there, and a lot of people don't know the connection.
That was my next question. My next question is, what is the relationship between tennis and HBCUs? And do you think the sports stereotype as a country club sport impacts this relationship?
I mean, I think it does for some reason. I mean, I went to an HBCU. I went to North Carolina Central, and 80s, mid 80s, and a lot of the history that school had with the ATA and world-class players. It was kind of interesting. Then during the 80s, when I came through North Carolina Central, we really didn't even have, we didn't even have real uniforms and sneakers and all that. So it's like we went behind times, back in times, as opposed to progressing. But and it was kind of funny. There was a guy, John Lucas, who he was the #1 drafted basketball player out of the for the NBA draft the year he graduated. He went to Maryland University. He was a varsity player, basketball player, and tennis player. He was a world-class player, but he lived almost right across the street from North Carolina Central. And I didn't realize his connection and how great he was coming up. He could have been a professional tennis player, but he chose basketball. So a lot of people didn't know the connection with that, but he had a connection with North Carolina Central. So, I mean, there's a lot of history there. And I think a lot of people haven't researched it. I know Art Carrington has written a book on tennis, I think, Black tennis history in the 1800s and early 1900s. And I mean, it's published and everything. So that had a lot of pictures and a lot of history on the Black clubs that were also affiliated with the ATA. So, I mean, it's out there, but I mean, just like a lot of things going on now in our history, a lot of people don't want history to be brought up like that. So, you know, they don't want the truth to be told.
Yeah.
So,
So you have worked in the tennis world for over 30 years. Do you think that the way do you think that the way today's youth interact with tennis is different than when you started, whether at the junior or collegiate level? If so, what do you think has changed and why?
I think very much so. I can remember when I, you know, even going to college or when I was in high school in Wilmington, North Carolina, there were some country clubs there that we really couldn't even go to. And they had USTA tournaments. And when I say we, Black people couldn't go, only Black workers could work there. And they were, you know, across the country, like in golf, there were clubs like that, you know, we're talking about 80s and 90s where, you know, Blacks couldn't even be members or couldn't even be affiliated with it. So I think, especially the generation now, really doesn't have to deal with much of that. You know, I can remember playing tournaments because I didn't grow up playing a lot of junior tournaments. And then I would go and play. I didn't feel like I belonged in some of those tournaments for some reason because I would be the only Black or whatever in the tournament. So, and to see a lot of these kids now that don't have these doubts and, you know, they feel like they belong. So I think that's a big issue. I just hope they don't lose. I hope they really learn the history and know how to use that to motivate them and to be the best they can be. So.
Yeah. So final question, and this is the question we ask everyone at the end. Why tennis? Why do you think tennis has been such an influential platform for social activism throughout its history?
I just think because it's an individual sport, I mean, man on man, like boxing, you know, it's you against the world. And if you have, you know, if you have it in you to succeed in tennis, more than likely you're going to succeed in life. I think tennis shadows life, you know, it's similar to life. You don't always win. You have to bounce back. You have to keep coming. So if you can learn that at a young age, I think you'll be okay in life. How to persevere.
Very true. I've had a lot of heartbreaking tennis matches in my day, but it's all about bouncing back.
That is. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Coach Henry.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And good luck with everything, and let me know how it turns out. So
I will. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for more upcoming content. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Why?